So you have the word socialism scaring people, and it sounds like a huge thing is Israel-Palestine.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on that stuff?
Well, I'm going to put my coffee down. There's so many things that have to be said. And what I've learned is if you don't say all of them, people think you're abandoning them. So here's some things in no particular order that I know. I know that there are unspeakable horrors taking place in Gaza. I know that those unspeakable horrors are something that was unleashed by a war that started with unspeakable horrors being perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th.
Well, I mean, that wasn't the beginning of the conflict.
Of course. I mean, this goes back to 47 and it goes back before 47. But this is exactly my point.
Right.
The moment you say anything about, the moment I talk about disgust at babies being put in ovens and people being flayed by Hamas on October 7th, somebody says, well, you're not talking about the history of the Nakba and what happened with the displacement of Palestinians. And the moment I express disgust at watching people in Gaza being starved, somebody says, well, you must be excusing what happened with Hamas. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
There is nothing intrinsically anti-Semitic about speaking up for the rights of Palestinians. At the same time, a lot of people I know who lie awake at night worried about their kids going to college or walking the streets, hear expressions of support for Palestinian civilian life and think about the fact that even though nothing about that makes you soft on anti-Semitism, the experience has been that those two things, expressions of support for Palestinian civilian life and expressions of anti-Semitism, have sometimes traveled together because there is, in fact, an explosion of anti-Semitism going on in this country.
Here at Harvard, it's easily one of America's most anti-Semitic, hateful universities.
I was one of the students who was doxxed after October 7th. There was a student letter that 34 student organizations signed, and that ended up causing a huge global kind of uproar, and there were trucks and names and stuff leaked to the public in terms of who signed. My name's right there.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Damn.
The perspective of our generation is it's really a matter of scale and mobility. Because obviously it's not good for someone to be targeted in an anti-Semitic tirade on a college campus. But you look at, 65,000 plus civilians killed in Gaza, and then you think about somebody getting harassed on a college campus, and it just doesn't seem like a fair shake to balance one and say, someone's at Harvard, and there's protesters who are hurting someone's feelings versus people who can't leave, stuck in an open air prison, haven't been able to leave since 2005. They're getting shot indiscriminately in aid lines. They want sovereignty. Even if you want to go all the way back, Israel was supporting Hamas through Qatar as a way to weaken the leadership in the West Bank because they knew that Arafat and the PLO and the Palestinian Authority was a more secular organization with less radical goals. So now we're in this position and I would call it the Gaza genocide. That's what I would call it. We can't believe that our tax money is going to this war that we don't consent to funding. And we have to wake up every day in this unaffordable reality. And thankfully I've been successful, but I still can't even afford a house because I just realized that 10% is actually the down payment. I don't have 10% liquid capital to put down. So already have exceeded. And so it's just it's a bad situation.
Look, I feel all of that. I also think it's a mistake to say that the reason that housing is unaffordable here is because we're aiding countries. The same, Trump and Vance tried to do this with Ukraine, right? The reason we need to cut off Ukraine is because, we could use that money better at home. If you look at what's actually happening with the money here at home, it's not like every dollar that comes out of foreign aid. It's the same thing with USAID, right? And cutting, not that it was that much to begin with, but cutting food that we're sending to save people from starvation and disease in sub-Saharan Africa is going to somehow automatically wind up in your pocket. Most of the time, it's not. It's winding up in the pocket of the wealthiest Americans who are getting tax cuts under this administration. So I don't think that frustration with affordability at home means that we cut off aid abroad. I do think that what we spend money on abroad has to align with our values, which is why I think you see more and more people in my party saying, wait a minute, it's one thing to want to make sure that Israel can shoot down missiles that are being rained down on them by the Iranians. And it's another thing to be sponsoring Netanyahu going in to annex the West Bank or, going in to invade Gaza, right? Yeah. But I really think we have to talk about what we're doing with our money here at home in a way that is accountable to the domestic side of the policy ledger. Because that's not, I'm sorry, but the reason it's unaffordable here at home is not because we're helping certain causes abroad. That's never been the biggest share of our funding. And the trade-offs are real, but the trade-offs are between people who live here and other people who live here. And mainly it's the wealthiest people who live here versus everybody else.
So if the concern is anti-Semitism, I think that just to circle back, I have seen an insane explosion of anti-Semitic comments on Instagram in a way that I thought would be impossible even 5 years ago. And you have people who are actually neo-Nazis taking advantage of the post-October 7th discourse to sort of piggyback on that to push their own agenda, pretending they care about Palestinians.
Right, it's a
for that
pretext.
reason.
I mean, a lot of people use it as a pretext, right? And part of how you can tell that is a lot of us are so troubled by, including a whole generation, right, focused on what we are seeing and rightly disturbed by what we're seeing every day in Gaza. But remember, some of these things, some of these expressions of anti-Semitism happened on the morning of October 8th. Like before Israel even responded to October 7th, there were some of these things happening, like on U.S. soil, like, the triangles being painted that are like a Hamas symbol. Like, so that's part of what I'm saying. Like, these two things in principle are not connect. They don't relate, right? Anti-Semitism, by definition, is an unjustifiable racial hatred, right? A position on the conflict and the effect that it's having, especially the effect it's having on men, women, and children in Gaza, is concern for people, right? Those two things in principle should not have anything to do with each other.
Right.
But in practice, a lot of people who are worried about their kids or worried about their family or worried about themselves see that, like, it's not hypothetical. It's not just like somebody getting yelled at on a college campus. It's like people getting shot up and like a guy with a flamethrower thinking he's helping children in Gaza by attacking Jews, right? Like, this shit is real.
No, I think there's a lot of misguided energy when it comes to what people see as support. But I will say most of the Jewish people that I know that are my friends are pretty anti-Zionist, and they see, and I would agree with them, that every Israeli bomb dropped on Gaza, every bullet fired into an aid line just ratchets up the anti-Semitism a little bit more. And so you have to ask the question, was October 7th the driving force of anti-Semitic outbursts? It really feels like the Israeli government and the IDF's military action is the driving force of anti-Semitism.
I mean, I don't think it's okay to blame anti-Semitism on, like, it comes too close to making it sound like that makes the anti-Semitism okay. I know that's not what you're saying, but I think we hear that. At the same time, like everything that Netanyahu's government does right now, like everything you see the IDF doing in the food lines or the annexation or the ground movements into Gaza is incinerating a really important part of the moral fiber of what connects America to Israel and what I think connects a lot of American Jews to the Zionist project, right? The Zionist project is supposed to be about this moral realization that something happened, like a near extermination event for American Jews happened. And part of how the world needs to respond is to recognize that Jewish people will not be safe anywhere unless they have self-determination in their homeland.
The settler expansions into the West Bank have been pretty crazy.
And again, designed to make it impossible for there to be a functional Palestinian state. Netanyahu's government is doing everything that it can to make it impossible, right? I mean, that's what the annexation, the settlements, that's what this is about. It's about spiking the two-state solution, which also means defying what has generally been America's position, which is part of why a lot of people in America are saying, wait a minute, why am I sponsoring Netanyahu to defy what America views as the way forward? And I think what the establishment and those in power need to think about, and the whole country needs to think about, is, are we actually ready to do what it would take for a two-state solution to work? Is there any shred of hope? Or is two-state solution just something that politicians can say to kind of end this very difficult question and move on to the next question without being committed to what it actually takes to make it happen?
You think that it's possible?
I have to believe that it's possible, because I can't think of something that would be better. But I also want to be honest toward your question. Like, it's never felt more out of reach in my lifetime than it does right now.
We're looking at it like, how can anybody possibly, talk about October 7th at this particular point when things have escalated to this horrific point where, like I said, you have 60,000 plus dead, and most importantly, people can't leave. Well, first of all, they don't want to leave, but the lack of mobility, I think, is the scariest part. And so I think a lot of us wonder, whenever we're 40, 50 years old and we're in positions of political power, are we still going to be in this situation, or is there going to be this permanent political gridlock when it comes to Israel-Palestine?
I think a lot of that does come down to leadership, and American leadership can make a difference, but I think the leadership there is what will make the most difference. And I think that this gridlock is being kept in place largely by Netanyahu, because it's his ticket to stay in power, right? I mean, you see the people taking to the streets in Israel. What he's doing is obviously not good for the hostages either. And there's still hostages, right? Which also falls out of the discourse sometimes. But like, that's real, they are real. There's a lot of people who all they want is the bodies back of their loved ones, but there's also people who are alive, right? None of that is getting better because of what Netanyahu is doing. He needs this to stay just as bad as it is so that he can stay in power and stay ahead of criminal charges and all the rest of it. So that has to change. And there needs to be American leadership that can do two things at once, that can be committed to the security of people in Israel and unwilling to sponsor some of the things that defy American policy and prevent peace from becoming real.
Right. Do you think that there's any way that Israel will get back the right or the left? Because they lost the left first, and it took about a year and a half for them to lose the right. Do you think that our relationship politically with them is going to be permanently severed, or is there a bridge back to mutual understanding for them?
What I know is that if it becomes just a partisan thing, then I think the relationship is destroyed, because it used to be a bipartisan concern. I mean, it still is a bipartisan concern, but feels very different now.
In terms of the anger that's been brewing on both sides over the past couple years?
Yeah, I mean, more and more people, I think, on both sides are pessimistic about a two-state solution. But I can't think of anything better.
Yeah.